On a new sunny morning, a girl arrives at the Nagumo Detective Agency, stands in front of the building, and gives a small smile. Events begin with the sound of cheers and applause from some of the crowd. We hear a female reporter saying the junior detective has done it again, meaning that this detective managed to solve an old case the police had failed to solve. We see two police officers escorting a suspect into a police car, and everyone gets into the car and leaves the scene. Then, and at the same moment, we see a group of men and women gathering around a young detective. The reporter asks him for his opinion on the case. The young detective stands, turns to her, looks into the camera with a wink, and says the case wasn't exciting enough, then jokes, "Just kidding." Suddenly, we hear a phone ringing in the background. This wakes the detective up in a panic from his sleep. It turns out everything leading up to this was just a dream, recalling his youth. Now he's visibly older than before. This is his painful present. He answers the phone on his desk, saying, "This is the Nagumo Detective Agency." We find out that this is Keiichiro Nagumo, who was a famous detective in his youth, but over time has begun losing his knack for solving cases. The caller is his landlord, demanding the overdue rent. Nagumo asks him to be patient for a few days, and apologizes, thinking to himself he's only late by one day, but this damn landlord keeps chasing him. In the past, this landlord used to have a lot of respect for Nagumo. Nagumo gets up from his chair and heads to the door of his office. All of a sudden, he feels a sharp pain in his back and collapses to the floor. Still, he forces himself to get up. He has a surveillance job he needs to go to, and it's been a really long time since his last case. He has to be fully focused. He can't afford any mistakes now. Nagumo starts crawling on his stomach with his hands, motivating himself to get up. He reaches out to open the door just then. The girl we saw at the start of the episode opens it, standing there in her high school uniform. Nagumo looks at her, but his gaze isn't innocent, it's sly. The girl notices his sly look and gets furious. She pulls out something like a baseball bat and swings it in his face, warning him not to look at her that way. Nagumo insists he didn't look at her like that on purpose, but she doesn't believe him. He yells at her, "Who are you anyway?" If she's a client, he's sorry, but he's too busy at the moment to help. She replies that she came to him because she found this, and she pulls out a red box with a face on it. The girl seems confused, then starts searching and pulling out tons of things she was carrying, leaving Nagumo surprised at how much stuff she has with her. She says it looks like she forgot the thing she was looking for, but suddenly remembers she put it behind her neck. She takes out a sheet of paper and hands it to Nagumo. He reads Ite's the flyer he made when he was short on staff at the agency. The girl coughs and says she's here to apply for a job at his agency, but Nagumo refuses to hire her. She yells, objecting to his rejection, and the noise annoys him. He asks how a high school girl could be a detective, and complains about her clothes, saying she looks flashy. She snaps back, "That's not true," and points out his way of thinking is outdated and gross, but Nagumo doesn't care. The girl pleads that working alone is too hard for him, and he really needs help. Nagumo pulls out a pack of cigarettes, lights one, and looks at her, saying being a detective is tough work. You need to be steady, not afraid, never give in to temptation. It takes real talent. He looks at her again, and tells her it's not a job for a girl like her. Then he gives her the same sly look as before. The girl notices, gets angry, screams at him to stop looking at her that way, and pulls out a spear, hitting Nagumo with it. He apologizes. The girl asks why he tries to take advantage every time, giving her that sly look. Nagumo denies it again, saying that's not the case. She warns him, telling him maybe it's not like that, but she knows karate and if he tries anything stupid, he'll lose his head. Nagumo is surprised and asks why she wants to be a detective's assistant when there are lots of part-time jobs. The girl is surprised by Nagumo's question, smiles, and replies she wants to be a detective. Nagumo mutters if that's what someone says while carrying a spear. The girl explains she has worked hard ever since she was young to become a detective one day. She even trained herself to carry all this stuff with her. Nagumo objects, saying carrying things isn't much of a skill, but the girl is sure she'll be useful, and begs him to hire her. Barely getting the words out, Nagumo suddenly gets whacked in the nose by the girl, who says there's no need to discuss it. He grabs his nose, which is bleeding, and stands there frustrated. The girl says she's an ambitious detective and guesses what Nagumo was about to say. She puts her hand on her chin, thinking. Nagumo asks if she can really do it. She looks at him, reassures him that she can, and says she watched all the Furuhara episodes just yesterday back to back. She puts a finger to her forehead, thinking. Nagumo tells her this can't possibly work. She then gives him a sly look, saying that lately he's barely had any cases, which is why he's broke and can't afford to hire anyone. Nagumo is shocked by how accurate she is, but ignores her and tells her to go bother someone else, which surprises her. Then we see Nagumo at the station, holding a photo of a woman named Takako, probably around 27 years old. She married the client who hired Nagumo about 2 years ago, but the suspicion is that Takako is having secret meetings during her work hours, which is why Nagumo suspects her. As Nagumo observes her, Takako moves, and he starts following her. Then we see Nagumo watching her as she walks in the opposite direction, thinking she's going to meet a man. We watch him cautiously follow her as she enters a cafe. He decides to go in after her, but is surprised to find it's a fancy cafe. He tells himself, how can a middle-aged man like him enter such a luxurious cafe alone? And decides he'll watch Takako from outside. Suddenly, the young girl appears and grabs his arm. You'll definitely be embarrassed if you go into this cafe alone. I suggest I go in with you as your younger friend. Nagumo looks at her and is forced to agree. When Nagumo and the girl enter the cafe, the waitress asks them what they'd like to order. Nagumo looks at the menu but can't read it. Here, the little girl steps in and orders a strange drink from the waitress. Nagumo shouts, "That's too much." We see them sitting at a table near Takako. Nagumo looks at his drink and says he has sensitive teeth. The girl asks him what that means, and he replies it doesn't matter, then asks her why she doesn't look for another detective agency that's hiring. The girl replies that his office is the closest one to her home. Here, Nagumo tells the girl he's been a detective for 20 years, and being a detective isn't easy. The girl points out he's here to watch this woman, meaning Takako. Nagumo confirms it. The girl asks if it's about a romantic relationship, and he says yes, explaining he's watching her closely because he expects her to meet someone important. The girl is shocked by his obvious surveillance method. How can a skilled detective watch someone so clearly? This way, they'll be found out. Nagumo explains that he's getting old and his eyesight is poor, so what's he supposed to do? The girl yells at him and advises him to wear glasses. Here, Takako hears them and looks at them. At that moment, the little girl realizes this and tells Nagumo that the woman suspects them. To avoid suspicion, the girl takes a piece of ice cream and puts it in Nagumo's mouth like lovers, but Nagumo protests that his teeth are sensitive. The girl insists so they can avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, we see Takako looking at them and muttering that if they're lovers, the age difference between them is too big. Here, the girl looks at Takako and realizes her plan worked. Nagumo tells her not to worry too much, because Takako won't be able to figure them out that easily. The girl looks angrily at Nagumo and tells him that if it weren't for her, he'd be dead by now. Nagumo is surprised by her words and asks her why. The girl continues, explaining that these days, with just a small smartphone, photos can be sent all over the world, so people are more careful than before, and are afraid of anyone watching them. Nagumo looks at her then and asks her what a smartphone is. The girl takes out her own phone and shows it to him, explaining that this is a smartphone, and asks him what he thought it was. Nagumo replies that he thought it was a hand mirror. The girl yells at him and tells him that if he really considers himself a detective, he's old-fashioned. Nagumo takes the phone, looks at it, and mutters that times have changed. The girl continues, telling him she was watching Nagumo as he watched this woman, and explains that he's still chasing and watching people with food in his hand, which is very old-fashioned. Nagumo is surprised that the girl was following him, and asks her if she's not embarrassed to follow a middle-aged man. Nagumo doesn't know what high school is. The girl tells him she now realizes why he doesn't have many cases, because he's lost his touch. Nagumo agrees with her, and tells her that he has indeed lost his touch, and his intuition has weakened, but all he knows are the old methods that once brought him glory and earned him the title of the Great Detective. The girl here believes Nagumo. Meanwhile, we see someone appear and stand next to Takako, start talking to her, then hug her. Here, Nagumo shouts that he was right. Proving infidelity is easier than proving innocence. The girl suggests he take pictures of them. Nagumo takes out a camera that's obvious to everyone, which angers the girl who tells him it's too obvious. Nagumo explains that's all he has and he doesn't know what to do. Takako and the man with her notice them then. The girl acts quickly, takes out her phone, and snaps a selfie with Nagumo. But when they go to the office, we see that the photo shows Takako and the man with her in the background. The man who hired Nagumo is shocked by his wife's infidelity. Then we see the man pay Nagumo and leave. The girl asks Nagumo if she can be his assistant, but Nagumo refuses. The girl gets angry and explains she helped him a lot. Nagumo tells her that's true, and he'll give her a voucher to visit his agency anytime, explaining that it's too early for her to be his assistant. At that moment, the girl snatches Nagumo's jacket and tells him that's payment for the day. Nagumo asks the girl how she feels about her first job. The girl replies that it lacks some excitement. Nagumo is surprised by her answer. The girl explains she's just joking. Nagumo is even more surprised and asks if she knows him. The girl leaves him and runs off. Nagumo calls out to her and tells her he doesn't know her name. The girl looks at him and tells him her name is Mashiro. Nagumo advises her to be careful as she walks her way. Suddenly, he feels a pain in his back again and falls to the ground. Mashiro comes back to him and tells him that he's the one who needs to be careful as he walks. One morning in Nagumo's office, we see Nagumo and Mashiro shouting, holding pictures of a cat, and saying, "No, not this cat." In front of them, a woman tells them it's a different cat. Nagumo already notices this, looks at Mashiro, and asks her what they should do with this cat. Mashiro suggests that this cat become the agency's cat, Cerberus. Nagumo looks at Mashiro, who has decided to keep the cat, and she approaches the cat's face, which spits at her. Mashiro gets very angry and starts scolding the cat. Meanwhile, We see the woman in front of them asking about her request. After that, we see a poster with "Any job accepted" written on it. Mashiro asks Nagumo for his opinion on it and explains that with this poster, clients will flock to them. Nagumo looks at the poster, then grabs it and tears it up. Mashiro shouts at him and wants to understand why he did that. Nagumo looks at her and asks her what she meant by "any job accepted," and continues that they are detectives who don't know everything and have their pride as detectives. Mashiro looks at him and reminds him that he was looking for a lost cat. Nagumo explains to her that finding a lost cat is a detective's job. Mashiro replies that being a detective these days is very hard to make a living, and they have to accept all kinds of jobs, like catching a bear that escaped into the city and things like that. Nagumo explains he doesn't want to risk his life and yells at her, asking how it makes sense to attract clients with this poster, and tells her to get rid of it. Mashiro explains to him that she distributed 500 posters around the city. Nagumo is shocked by her. He asked her to find out how much it would cost to make 500 copies and looked at the cat, asking if it wanted some food, but was startled when he noticed the cat had a fly in its mouth. Suddenly, the cat started chasing Nagumo, who was scared of it. At that moment, Mashiro grabbed the cat, took the bug from its mouth, and advised it not to eat insects. Nagumo yelled at her and asked how she could touch a bug with her hands. Mashiro looked at him and told him insects are nothing. Then, Mashiro realized that Nagumo was afraid of insects, so she started to get closer to him, suddenly ran after him while holding the bug, and Nagumo ran away scared. Suddenly, Nagumo turned towards Mashiro, grabbed her angrily, and threw her out the window, telling her to remove the 500 posters from around the city. Behind him appeared a strange little girl, who called the police to report that a high school girl had been killed. Nagumo shouted at her, saying it was all a misunderstanding. After that, Nagumo explained to the strange girl that Mashiro really didn't mind falling from the 5th floor. Then he asked her why she was there. The girl explained that she'd seen the poster saying he accepted any job, so she had come to him. Nagumo was surprised that the poster had worked. The girl said she had a beehive in her house. Nagumo looked at her and asked her to keep what he was about to say a secret, telling her he was very scared of insects and couldn't do anything about it, but there was a solution: he would call Mashiro to help, since she didn't have a problem with bugs. He grabbed his phone but asked the girl how the phone worked. The girl was confused. Meanwhile, Mashiro was removing the posters when Nagumo called and told her they'd received an extermination request. Mashiro was really happy, and Nagumo told her to go alone. She asked for the address, so Nagumo asked the girl, got the address, and passed it on to Mashiro, who went there. Nagumo asked her if she could see the nest. Mashiro was standing in front of a Yakuza group's building and answered yes, telling him it was a huge pest nest. Nagumo told her to completely wipe out the nest. Mashiro shouted, asking how he could talk about that so casually, so Nagumo asked why she was being so timid now and said he was counting on her. Mashiro promised she'd do her best. Mashiro began to talk to herself, saying that she had trained a lot, watched all the action movies, and that now she was basically a secret agent. At that moment, Nagumo asked her if she was ready. She replied yes. Meanwhile, Nagumo was reading a book about pest extermination in his office and talking to Mashiro on the phone. He advised her to get as close to the nest as possible and to check for any enemies at the entrance. At that moment, Mashiro walked into an office full of people who wondered who the girl was. Nagumo advised her to block the entrance, and Mashiro did just that. One of them walked over to Mashiro, laughed in her face, and asked what she was doing there. Nagumo told her that once she'd blocked the entrance, she should spray the insecticide. That's when Mashiro sprayed the insecticide in the man's face. The rest of the guys panicked and wondered if it was tear gas and prepared to fight her. While this was happening, Nagumo was still on the phone with Mashiro, telling her that spraying the insecticide would make everyone go crazy and advised her to be careful. The people attacked Mashiro, but she dodged their hits and fought back. Nagumo warned her to watch out for insect stings. Then, one guy pointed a gun at her and said he'd turn her into a beehive. Nagumo was shocked to hear a voice that sounded like his and heard gunshots over the line. Mashiro hid from the gunfire, getting ready to attack, then pulled out a strange weapon and fired back at them. Nagumo was amazed. He had no idea what was happening to Mashiro. In the end, Mashiro beat everyone except one guy, who was getting ready to attack her. When Mashiro dropped her weapon, he lunged, but suddenly he saw Mashiro as a warrior, and behind her was a monster. The man got scared, fell to the ground in front of Mashiro, apologized to her, and promised he'd leave the Yakuza for good. Mashiro then told Nagumo the job was done, just as he'd expected. The girl said she was very happy. Nagumo asked Mashiro if she knew what kind it was. Mashiro didn't understand, so Nagumo told her to describe what she saw. Mashiro looked at the man in front of her and told Nagumo they had long legs. Nagumo was surprised and asked if it could be hornets. Later, in Nagumo's office, he and Mashiro watched the news, which reported that a Yakuza group had been taken down by a mysterious person. Stunned, Nagumo asked if that was her. She said yes. Nagumo screamed at her, asking how exterminating a beehive turned into destroying a Yakuza gang. Mashiro said she'd made a mistake and explained that she'd brought someone else with her. That person turned out to be the last member of the Yakuza group whom Mashiro had spared. His name was Nezu. Nezu said he was at Nagumo's service for anything he needed. Nagumo asked him to get some coffee. Mashiro was happy that their office had gained another member. Then the girl appeared behind them and said, "What about my request?"